In the yard, tension thick as steel. An Admiral strikes, but she won't kneel. A single twist, a crack, a stand. 458 watch as justice lands. Before we dive into this incredible true story of courage and leadership, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that inspires. Let's start asterisk. The morning sun stretched its first golden rays over the small military base tucked at the edge of Cedar Creek, a quiet town in the Pacific Northwest. The base wasn't enormous, just enough to house a few hundred soldiers, officers, and support staff, but it carried the weight of discipline, honor, and tradition. For Lieutenant Claire Donovan, it had become both a proving ground and a battlefield, though not the kind anyone expected. Claire had grown up in Cedar Creek, the daughter of a local mechanic and a school teacher. From a young age, she had learned the value of hard work, quiet resilience, and independence. Her father had taught her how to stay steady under pressure, and her mother had shown her the power of words, observation, and strategic thinking. Those lessons carried her through the trials of military life, but they did little to shield her from the skepticism she faced as a young female officer in a male-dominated environment. The base was buzzing that morning with the usual mix of drills, reports, and small talk. Soldiers marched in precise lines, boots striking the pavement in unison, their faces a mask of focus. Officers moved with brisk authority, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the horizon for mistakes, weaknesses, or signs of disorganization. And at the center of this carefully choreographed world was Admiral Thomas Hargrove, a man whose reputation for strictness, temper, and ego preceded him. Claire had encountered Hargrove a few times before. His words were often laced with thinly veiled condescension, and he seemed to take particular satisfaction in belittling anyone who didn't meet his exacting standards or, in Claire's case, who didn't fit the stereotype he expected. She had heard the whispers in the mess hall, the subtle jokes, and the chuckles behind her back. The lieutenant? She won't last a month under Hargrove. But Claire had learned early not to respond to mockery with anger, only with preparation and resolve. That morning, the air carried a tension beyond the usual routine. Claire had been assigned to supervise a readiness inspection for a group of 458 soldiers. It was a large crowd, all assembled in the main drill yard, standing in precise formation under the watchful eyes of the higher-ranking officers. Claire knew the stakes. Any misstep could reflect poorly, not just on the soldiers, but on her leadership. She checked her uniform in the mirror, adjusted her cap, and squared her shoulders. She didn't feel nervous. She felt focused as she walked toward the assembled soldiers. Hargrove's voice cut across the yard like a whip. "Lieutenant Donovan," he barked, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "why don't you step forward and show us how a young lady handles authority?" A ripple of laughter went through the ranks. Quiet, but noticeable. Claire kept her face neutral, her mind steady. She had anticipated this, she always did, but that didn't make it sting any less. She stepped forward, heels clicking against the pavement, and met Hargrove's gaze without flinching. "Thank you, Admiral," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the yard. "Today, we will conduct a full readiness inspection. Every soldier will be evaluated on uniform standards, protocol, and response time. I expect full compliance, and I expect professionalism. Let's begin." For a moment, there was silence. Then, a few scattered nods, followed by the mechanical precision of soldiers moving into position. Claire walked down the rows, inspecting each squad. She noted small errors, gave quick instructions, and offered guidance where needed. The soldiers respected her. Many had served under her direct leadership and knew that she was fair but exacting. But Hargrove's eyes were on her, sharp and calculating, like a hawk circling prey. "You're moving too slow," Hargrove called out suddenly, pointing at Claire with an accusatory finger. "Do you want these men to think you're indecisive?" Claire didn't flinch. She straightened, her voice calm but firm. "Admiral, accuracy is just as important as speed. I ensure they understand each standard fully. Rushing now will only cause errors later." The soldiers shifted uneasily, sensing the tension rise. Hargrove's face flushed with irritation, his usual composed mask cracking. He took a step closer. To Claire, leaning in as if proximity could intimidate her. "You think you're in charge here? Don't forget who commands this base." Claire's jaw tightened. She had encountered arrogance before, but there was a difference between authority and abuse of power. And she had learned that the only way to confront the latter was with quiet, undeniable strength. "I am aware, Admiral," she said steadily, "but my responsibility is to the men and women under my supervision. Their readiness is my priority. I will not compromise their performance or their safety for appearances." A low murmur ran through the soldiers. Claire noticed it, but didn't let it sway her. Hargrove's lips thinned, and he raised his hand as if to strike, a motion so fast it was almost instinctive. Claire reacted without thinking. Years of martial arts training and reflex drills kicked in, and she intercepted his arm, twisting sharply. A sharp crack echoed across the yard, and Hargrove stumbled back, gripping his wrist. The soldiers gasped. 458 pairs of eyes widened, mouths hanging open. The man who had ruled with intimidation, the Admiral himself, was now reeling from Claire's. Defense Doc Claire didn't let fear or adrenaline control her. She held her ground, meeting Hargrove's shocked glare. "Do not strike me or anyone else again," she said, her voice steady, unwavering, yet carrying the weight of authority. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The soldiers were caught between awe and disbelief. Claire had done what none of them, or perhaps even she, had expected. The Admiral, once untouchable, had been stopped by the very person he had sought to undermine. Hargrove's face turned crimson, a mix of pain and humiliation. Claire stepped back, signaling the soldiers to resume their formation, her calm demeanor restoring a fragile order. She knew the consequences could be severe, but so did she know that passivity in the face of injustice was far worse. As the inspection continued, the soldiers' whispers grew words of admiration, respect, and even pride. Claire moved among them, correcting postures and offering brief words of encouragement. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any speech could. By the time the inspection ended, the tension in the yard had shifted. Claire's courage and decisiveness had changed something fundamental, not just in the soldiers' perception of her, but in the very dynamics of authority on the base. Hargrove, humiliated but not yet defeated, retreated to his office, clutching his arm and plotting his next move. Claire stood alone for a moment, watching the sun climb higher over Cedar Creek. She allowed herself a small, private exhale. This was just the beginning. Standing up to injustice, she knew, was never simple or safe, but it was always necessary. And deep down, she felt a quiet, steady surge of something powerful, the unwavering certainty that she would not be broken, no matter the odds. And that respect earned through courage was far stronger than fear enforced through intimidation. The hours following the confrontation with Admiral Hargrove felt surreal to Claire. The drill yard had emptied, the soldiers returning to their barracks or duties, yet the tension lingered like a low hum. News of what had happened spread quickly, whispered first among the soldiers, then through the officers, until it reached every corner of the base. Some spoke in hushed admiration, others in disbelief. Claire, however, remained focused on her duty. Inside the command building, she sat, at her desk reviewing reports and inspection notes. Her hand still tingled slightly from the force she had applied in defense. a sharp reminder of the physical risk she had taken. Yet more pressing than her own discomfort was the knowledge that Hargrove would not let this incident slide. She knew him too well. He was a man who thrived on hierarchy, control, and humiliation, and her public challenge to his authority had rattled him profoundly. Her assistant, a young lieutenant named Marcus, knocked lightly before entering. "Ma'am, there's a message for you," he said, voice careful. He handed her a sealed envelope bearing the Admiral's personal seal. Claire opened it slowly, eyes scanning the typed words. It was a formal request for her presence in Hargrove's office, noting that the incident in the yard required immediate clarification and disciplinary review. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew this wasn't just about procedure. It was about power. Steeling herself, she stood and adjusted her uniform. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, a display of calm confidence. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a battlefield of words, strategy, and endurance. The corridor leading to Hargrove's office was unusually quiet. Even the hum of fluorescent lights seemed subdued, as if the base itself was holding its breath. Claire's footsteps echoed against the polished floor, each step a testament to her determination. She entered the office without knocking, as protocol dictated, and faced the Admiral. Hargrove sat behind his large oak desk, his posture rigid. His arm was in a sling, and though he tried to mask it, his face betrayed a mixture of pain and anger. "Lieutenant Donovan," he said sharply, "do you understand the severity of your actions today?" Claire met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir. I understand the chain of command. I also understand the importance of safety and respect. Your actions in the drill yard today were unacceptable, and I acted to prevent harm to myself and to the soldiers under my supervision." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "You humiliated me in front of 458 soldiers. Do you have any idea what this does to morale? To discipline?" Claire held her ground. "With all due respect, sir, morale is built on trust, competence, and fairness, not fear. Soldiers respond to leadership that values their safety and integrity. You struck at me, an officer, in front of them. That is the opposite of leadership." For a moment, Hargrove said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then his voice dropped, controlled but sharp. "I see. You believe you are justified." "I am, sir," Claire replied calmly. "I will always uphold the standards of duty and respect, even when faced with intimidation. That is my responsibility as a leader." Hargrove leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "This changes things. You will be formally reprimanded for assaulting a superior officer, but I will also ensure your actions are noted for review. Make no mistake, Lieutenant, the repercussions will be significant." Claire felt the weight of his words, but she didn't let them break her. She had known the risks. She nodded once, respectfully. "Understood, sir." As she left the office, the corridor seemed narrower, the shadows longer. She could feel the stirrings of gossip, speculation, and quiet admiration alike. Some officers whispered that she had acted recklessly. Others quietly acknowledged her courage. But Claire knew that courage alone wasn't enough. She needed to navigate the politics, protect her soldiers, and ensure that justice, not fear, prevailed. The next days were a trial of endurance and patience. Claire continued her duties with unwavering focus, overseeing training, inspections, and logistics. Yet the subtle pressures were unrelenting. Hargrove's allies began questioning her decisions, scrutinizing her reports, and monitoring her interactions. There were closed-door meetings where her judgment was challenged, and whispers in the mess hall that tested her composure. Through it all, Claire remained steady. She knew that her strength wasn't just in defending herself physically. It was in maintaining dignity, clarity, and authority, even when others sought to undermine her. Her soldiers noticed. Many approached her quietly, expressing admiration, gratitude, and even concern. "You showed him he couldn't push you around," one young private said softly. That takes guts," Claire smiled faintly. "We all have to stand for what's right," she replied. "Courage isn't just about one moment. It's about every choice we make when no one else is watching, and when everyone is." One evening, as she reviewed reports in her office, Marcus knocked again. "Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." Claire looked up to see a familiar figure, Sergeant Major Davis, a grizzled veteran known for his sharp mind and unwavering loyalty to the soldiers. His eyes held a mixture of concern and respect. "You handled yourself well," Davis said quietly. "But Hargrove isn't the kind to let this go. He'll try to make things difficult for you, maybe even for the men under your command. You need to be careful." Claire nodded. "I know. That's why I'm documenting everything, Sergeant. I won't let fear or intimidation dictate how we lead." Davis studied her for a moment, then placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You've got the backbone of a leader, Lieutenant. Just remember, strength isn't just about standing up for yourself. It's about standing up for others, even when the world is against you." Those words settled in Claire's mind, a quiet affirmation of her purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the soldiers, for fairness, and for the principle that no one, no matter their rank, was above accountability. Yet, as the week wore on, the tension escalated. Hargrove began issuing orders that subtly undermined her authority, sending mixed messages to the troops, and even attempting to assign her tasks designed to isolate her or expose errors. The subtle harassment was relentless, a calculated test of her resolve. Claire endured. She leaned on her training, her instincts, and the trust she had built with her soldiers. She refused to respond with fear, anger, or aggression. Instead, she responded with clarity, consistency, and unwavering professionalism. Her every action reinforced a single truth: respect must be earned through integrity, not enforced through intimidation. One afternoon, as she led a tactical exercise, a younger soldier stumbled, misreading an order. Claire stepped forward, correcting the mistake with calm guidance, never raising her voice, never shaming him in front of others. Hargrove, observing from a distance, scowled. The subtle defiance in Claire's conduct was undeniable, yet she wore it like armor, confident and unyielding by the end of the week. The ripple effects of her confrontation were undeniable. The soldiers' loyalty shifted subtly but unmistakably. Toward Claire, where there had once been fear of Hargrove, there was now a quiet admiration for the lieutenant, who had dared to stand up to authority and protect those under her charge. Claire knew, however, that this was only the beginning. The battle for respect, fairness, and accountability was far from over. Hargrove's resentment simmered, and she sensed that the next move would be decisive, one that could either cement her authority or test her endurance in ways she had yet to imagine. As night fell over Cedar Creek, Claire sat at her desk, reviewing her plans for the next day. She thought of her parents, the lessons they had instilled, and the values that had carried her this far. She thought of her soldiers and the trust they had placed in her. And she thought of Hargrove, his arrogance, and the challenge that lay ahead. Her hand rested on her notebook, steady and resolute. This wasn't just about confrontation. It was about justice. It was about leadership. And Claire Donovan, lieutenant of Cedar Creek Military Base, was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The days on Cedar Creek Military Base had grown heavier, the tension nearly tangible in the air. Claire Donovan moved through the routines of duty with a careful precision, her calm exterior concealing the storm of scrutiny building around her. Every interaction, every order, every glance from higher-ranking officers was a test, a trap waiting to ensnare her. Hargrove's subtle campaign against her had begun to take shape, a slow, deliberate effort to erode her credibility, to make her doubt herself, and to instill fear in the soldiers who had begun looking up to her. It started with paperwork. Orders arrived with tight deadlines, contradictory instructions, and oversight in key areas that forced Claire to spend long hours cross-checking, documenting, and correcting. Hargrove had positioned certain officers, once neutral colleagues, as unofficial monitors, asking them pointed questions during briefings, questioning Claire's judgment and implying incompetence. Each day felt like a battlefield, not with weapons, but with words, authority, and perception. Yet, in the quiet moments, Claire found strength in her reflection. Alone in her office, she would close her eyes and remember the lessons from her parents. Stay calm, think clearly, and act with purpose. Fear, anger, or self-doubt could be manipulated, but integrity and focus were untouchable. She wrote everything down: each order, each interaction, each questionable directive. She knew that someday all of this documentation might be her shield against injustice. The soldiers, for their part, watched and learned. Their loyalty shifted further toward Claire, not just because of her defense against Hargrove, but because she consistently treated them with respect. She corrected mistakes without humiliation, praised genuine effort, and reminded them that every action mattered, not just for the inspection or the mission, but for their personal pride and the reputation of the unit. One afternoon, during a tactical exercise near the edge of the base, Claire noticed subtle signs of sabotage. Equipment that should have been in working order was misplaced. Communication systems showed intermittent faults, as though someone had tampered with them. She suspected Hargrove's influence was at work, someone eager to test her ability to adapt under pressure. Claire didn't panic. She called her squad. Together, her tone calm, her eyes steady. "We've got challenges ahead," she said. "Equipment may fail. Orders may be unclear. But we respond with clarity, focus, and teamwork. That's how we succeed. That's how we stay safe." The soldiers nodded, their respect for her unwavering. They trusted her because she had proven that she would never compromise their safety or dignity, even under immense pressure. But while her professional confidence remained strong, Claire could not ignore the personal toll. Late nights in the office, long hours inspecting the base, and the constant mental calculations of how to navigate Hargrove's machinations weighed heavily. She began to feel the isolation that came with standing against powerful authority. Loneliness that only deepened when Hargrove's whispers and suggestions reached higher command. One evening, Marcus came to her office, carrying another stack of reports. "Ma'am, there's a message circulating," he said quietly. "Some officers are questioning your decisions during the inspection. They're implying you overstepped your authority." Claire sighed. "I expected that. Hargrove's influence is strong, but we can't let fear dictate our actions. We respond with facts, not emotion." Marcus looked at her with concern. "You've handled yourself brilliantly so far, but it's getting personal. Some are talking about pushing for a formal reprimand, maybe even reassignment." Claire leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had faced mockery and underestimation before, but this was different. Hargrove wasn't just testing her. He was trying to destroy her reputation, her career, and the trust she had built with her soldiers. Yet even in that pressure, Claire felt a quiet certainty. She would not yield. Not now, not ever. The next morning brought a sudden escalation. Hargrove called a mandatory meeting in the main hall of the base, a rare formal gathering that included nearly all personnel. Claire entered, her uniform crisp, her steps deliberate. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. Hargrove waited at the podium, his arm still in a sling, his expression carefully. "Neutral, Lieutenant Donovan," he began, his tone carefully measured. "Recent events have caused concern regarding chain of command protocol and leadership judgment. Today, we will review actions taken during the inspection and ensure that standards are maintained." Claire stood tall, keeping her voice steady and clear. "Sir, I understand the purpose of this review. I am ready to provide all documentation, observations, and explanations regarding the inspection, as well as any follow-up actions taken to ensure soldier readiness and safety." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Hargrove smirked, as if expecting hesitation or submission. "Very well. We'll review your decisions step by step. You may begin." Claire presented her reports, each one meticulously organized, each observation justified. She explained every corrective action taken with clarity and professionalism, emphasizing safety, accountability, and the training of the soldiers. Hargrove interjected occasionally, attempting to discredit her with pointed questions or insinuations, but Claire met each challenge with calm precision. As the review progressed, a subtle but powerful shift occurred. The soldiers, watching quietly from the sidelines, began to murmur among themselves. Claire's clear, factual explanations, coupled with her unwavering composure, contrasted sharply with Hargrove's veiled threats and attempts to dominate the narrative. Their whispers grew into quiet acknowledgments. She had acted rightly, with courage and intelligence. By the end of the meeting, Hargrove's composure had frayed. His forced neutrality could not hide the anger simmering beneath the surface. Claire had not just defended herself. She had exposed the cracks in his authority, demonstrating that respect and competence were stronger than fear and intimidation. Walking back to her office, Claire felt a mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph. She knew Hargrove would not relent, that the struggle for authority, recognition, and fairness was far from over. But for the first time, she felt that the battle lines had shifted. She had shown not just to Hargrove, but to every officer and soldier present, that courage, integrity, and careful preparation could overcome even the most entrenched arrogance. That night, as she reviewed her notes and prepared for the next day, Claire thought of her soldiers, of the men and women who had begun to see her not just as a leader, but as a protector, a strategist, and a model of resilience. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she was ready for whatever came next. Hargrove's retaliation would come. Of that she had no doubt. But Claire Donovan had learned a fundamental truth. Real strength wasn't measured by physical might alone. It was measured by moral clarity, emotional courage, and the willingness to stand for what was right, even when the entire system seemed poised against you. As she closed her notebook and looked out over the darkened base, she allowed herself one small, private smile. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, she felt the winds of change beginning to shift in her favor, and she would not let them go unchecked. The days on Cedar Creek Military Base grew heavier, and the tension thickened like fog. Claire Donovan felt it in every glance, every whisper, every cautious nod from fellow officers who were unsure where their loyalties should lie. Hargrove's influence had not waned. If anything, it had grown more insidious. His attempts to undermine her authority had evolved from subtle critiques and contradictory orders into a full-blown campaign of intimidation, veiled threats, and public scrutiny. Claire sensed it immediately when she arrived for the morning briefing. Officers who had once been neutral or mildly supportive now seemed guarded, hesitant to speak, their eyes flicking nervously toward Hargrove's office. Some even avoided her gaze entirely, their discomfort obvious. It wasn't fear of her, it was fear of him, and it gnawed at the morale of the base. Hargrove, still nursing his injured arm, had positioned himself front and center in the briefing room, flanked by several senior officers who were known for their loyalty. "Lieutenant Donovan," he began, his tone carefully measured. "There have been concerns raised regarding your decision-making during recent exercises. Some personnel report confusion and inefficiency. I trust you will clarify immediately." Claire felt the heat rise in her chest, but forced herself to remain composed. She knew this was a trap. He was trying to provoke her, to create a visible reaction that could be used against her. "Sir," she said calmly, "all exercises were conducted according to protocol, with emphasis on safety and operational efficiency. Any confusion that arose was addressed immediately, and all personnel were guided to full compliance." A murmur ran through the room. Claire ignored it. She continued, "I have documented every step, every corrective action, and every recommendation made to ensure clarity and readiness. I am prepared to provide this documentation for review." Hargrove's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation passing through his expression. "Very well. You may present your documentation." As Claire methodically went through her reports, she noticed the subtle but deliberate interruptions. Hargrove interjected with pointed questions, attempting to trip her up with hypothetical scenarios designed to make her look indecisive. Some of the senior officers nodded along with him, their expressions carefully neutral, their pens poised to record her perceived errors. Yet Claire remained unshaken. She responded to every challenge with clarity, precision, and confidence, demonstrating not only her competence, but also her unwavering commitment to her soldiers. Each response reinforced the truth that her actions were grounded in safety, fairness, and effective leadership, not ego or ambition. The tension escalated further during the next phase of the day, a live drill involving all 458 soldiers. Hargrove had ensured that the entire unit would be present, knowing that the eyes of every soldier would witness the interactions. Claire walked among them, checking equipment, observing formations, and offering quiet guidance. She noticed the subtle glances from the soldiers, some filled with admiration, some with disbelief, and some still hesitant, but she ignored them for the moment, focusing on her responsibility. Then came the moment Hargrove had been waiting for. During a demonstration, he deliberately issued conflicting orders to the soldiers, attempting to provoke confusion and undermine Claire's authority. The soldiers hesitated, unsure whose command to follow. Hargrove's face twisted with smug anticipation. Claire acted instantly. She raised her voice, not in anger, but in clear, unwavering authority. "Soldiers, follow my instructions. Maintain formation and proceed as trained. Execute with precision and discipline." The soldiers obeyed without hesitation. Their trust in Claire, built over weeks of consistent leadership and fairness, outweighed the fear Hargrove tried to instill. Claire moved among them, correcting minor errors calmly, reinforcing the principles of teamwork, and demonstrating that decisive, thoughtful leadership could overcome chaos and intimidation. Hargrove's irritation boiled over. He stepped forward, his voice sharp, cutting through the drill yard. "Lieutenant Donovan, I will not have my authority questioned in front of these men." Claire turned to face him, standing her ground. "Admiral, your actions today risked the safety and effectiveness of these soldiers. I will not allow that. To continue, discipline and respect must be mutual. Intimidation is not leadership." A tense silence fell over the yard. Soldiers froze, unsure of what would happen next. Hargrove's eyes blazed with fury, his arm raised as if to strike, the very motion he had attempted days before. But Claire was ready. Years of training, discipline, and experience had sharpened her instincts. She intercepted his movement with a swift, controlled motion, twisting his arm sharply and audibly. The crack echoed across the yard, silencing the murmurs of 458 soldiers. Hargrove stumbled back, clutching his arm, face a mask of shock and humiliation. For a moment, the world seemed suspended, every eye fixed on the scene. Claire's breath was steady, her posture unwavering, her voice calm but commanding. "Do not strike me or anyone else again," she said, her gaze locking onto Hargrove's with unyielding resolve. "Respect is earned through integrity, and leadership, not fear or intimidation." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the soldiers shifted, a low murmur of approval growing into a collective acknowledgement of Claire's courage. Hargrove's face was red with anger, pain, and humiliation. His carefully cultivated authority shattered in an instant. Claire stepped back, signaling the soldiers to resume their formations. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than words ever could. The drill yard, once a stage for intimidation and fear, had become a testament to courage, moral clarity, and the power of unwavering leadership. Yet the victory was not without consequence. Claire knew that Hargrove's wrath would not dissipate easily. The formal reprimands, the whispers, and the political maneuvering would continue. But for the first time, she felt a profound shift, not only in the perception of the soldiers, but in the balance of power on the base. Her office, her heart steady, and her mind clear, Claire realized that this moment was not merely about defending herself. It was about standing up for every soldier, every principle of fairness, and every instance of integrity that had ever been tested on that base. She had shown, beyond doubt, that courage and justice could overcome fear, and that the respect earned through action was far more powerful than the authority wielded through intimidation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Cedar Creek Military Base, Claire sat alone for a moment, reflecting on the storm she had weathered. The struggle was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. Hargrove's empire of fear had cracks, and with patience, strategy, and unwavering courage, she would ensure that justice prevailed, not only for herself, but for every soldier under her command. The battle lines had been drawn, and Claire Donovan was ready. The morning air on Cedar Creek Military Base carried an unusual stillness, a quiet tension that even the soldiers noticed as they assembled for roll call. Word of the prior confrontation had spread quickly, and anticipation hung thick in the yard. Claire Donovan walked to the center, her uniform immaculate, her posture resolute. Every step she took was deliberate, controlled, a quiet assertion of authority that no whisper of intimidation could shake. Admiral Hargrove arrived shortly after, his injured arm in a sling, his face a mask of controlled fury. The 458 soldiers were lined up in formation, standing rigidly, sensing that the moment was unlike any they had experienced before. This was not just a drill, a briefing, or an inspection. It was a test of courage, integrity, and leadership for everyone present. Hargrove, speaking first, attempted to reassert dominance. "Lieutenant Donovan," he began, voice sharp, "it has come to my attention that you acted without proper authority during recent inspections. Such behavior cannot be tolerated." Claire met his gaze, unwavering, her voice steady. "Admiral, my actions were taken to prevent harm and maintain the integrity of this unit. I have consistently followed protocol, ensured the safety and readiness of our soldiers, and upheld the values of leadership that this base stands for. Intimidation and physical aggression are not commands, they are violations." A hush fell over the soldiers. Every eye was on them, every mind straining to absorb the tension between authority and justice. Hargrove, sensing the shift, took a step forward, raising his voice. "You think you can challenge me, who has served decades and led hundreds before all these soldiers?" Claire's eyes locked on his, her tone calm but fierce. "I am not challenging you, sir. I am holding every leader accountable, including you. Authority is earned through integrity and respect, not fear and intimidation. That is the foundation of true leadership." The crowd of soldiers stirred quietly, some nodding subtly, some murmuring in agreement. They had watched Claire act decisively, fairly, and courageously in ways that Hargrove's intimidation could never inspire. Hargrove, frustrated, made a sudden motion, his arm jerking in a threatening strike. It was almost instinctive, a last attempt to regain control. But Claire had anticipated this. She moved with precision, twisting his arm firmly but controlled, the sound of a sharp crack echoing across the yard. Hargrove stumbled back, gripping, his arm in shock. For a long, tense moment, silence dominated the yard. Then, slowly, the soldiers began to react not with fear, but with respect and quiet awe. Claire's stance was steady, her eyes unwavering, her voice calm and commanding. "Do not strike anyone ever," she said, her gaze sweeping across the assembled soldiers. "Leadership is responsibility. Respect is mutual. Fear has no place here." For the first time, the Admiral's composure broke completely. His face flushed, his posture slumped, and the control he had so carefully maintained was gone. The soldiers, who had once feared him, now looked to Claire with admiration, their trust and loyalty shifting decisively. A senior officer stepped forward, holding official documents. "Admiral Hargrove, the evidence of misconduct and intimidation is clear. Lieutenant Donovan's actions were not only justified, but necessary to uphold the standards of this base. The recommendation is for formal reprimand of any physical aggression and acknowledgement of Lieutenant Donovan's leadership." Hargrove's mouth opened, then closed, unable to argue. The room was filled with the quiet authority of law, protocol, and undeniable truth. Claire exhaled softly, her resolve unwavering. She had anticipated the scrutiny, prepared her documentation, and demonstrated her integrity. Everything had led to this moment. The soldiers erupted in quiet applause, a mix of relief, pride, and respect. Claire looked at them, a faint smile forming. "We succeed together," she said, "through courage, preparation, and fairness. Every action matters. Every choice shapes our future." The shift on the base was profound. Hargrove, once an unchallenged figure of fear, had been exposed. Claire's reputation, built on steadfastness, clarity, and moral courage, became the standard by which leadership was measured. Soldiers who had once whispered about her potential now openly recognized her strength and wisdom. Later, in her office, Marcus approached with a quiet, admiring tone. "Ma'am, you did it. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you protected everyone here. They respect you because of it." Claire nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "It wasn't just for me. Leadership is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves and ensuring fairness prevails, no matter how difficult it gets. That's the kind of respect that lasts." As the sun set over Cedar Creek, casting long golden rays across the base, Claire looked out over the drill yard. She reflected on the journey, the ridicule, the scrutiny, the personal doubt, the isolation, and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced intimidation, injustice, and physical threat, and she had emerged not only unbroken, but stronger. Final twist came quietly, almost poetically. Hargrove, humbled and sidelined, would no longer wield fear as a tool of leadership. Claire Donovan, once underestimated and mocked, had earned not only the respect of her soldiers, but also a lasting legacy. That true authority comes not from rank or fear, but from courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment to justice. In the quiet of the evening, she allowed herself a small smile. Cedar Creek Military Base would never forget the day Lieutenant Claire Donovan proved that strength, fairness, and moral courage could move mountains, even in the face of 458 witnesses. And in that triumph, she found not vengeance, but justice. Not fear, but respect. Not isolation, but the unwavering trust of those she had sworn to lead.